Sup guys, it's Alex here, and welcome back to another edition of the Bracketology update. This one is for January 28th, as you can see right there, and after a weekend where nothing really crazy happened for once, this season has just been absolutely insane with all the different upsets happening and all the different movements in the polls. But for once, it was just kind of a regular week in college basketball. The top 7 in the AP poll remained the same. I mean, Kentucky ended up going on the road and beating Texas Tech, and then Baylor went on the road and beat Florida. And I mean, there were a couple other good wins throughout the week, but there wasn't really anything too crazy. No real upsets or anything, and that's kind of seen with the movements and stuff. It's just teams moving up like one or two seed lines, nothing actually too crazy, nobody falling super far. But I'll kind of go region by region here, just going through the different movements and stuff, just to keep you guys updated. So up here in the South Regional, we have Baylor remaining the 1 seed, Indiana up to an 8 after beating Michigan State and then only losing by 1 to Maryland. Stanford's down to a 9 after having a bad loss against California. I will count that one against them. Little Rock is up to a 14. Marquette's down to a 7, but that's just because Illinois is moving up to a 6. Purdue is now is new to the field as a 10. They had a couple of good quality wins this past week. Louisville is moving. I don't know why I keep saying new to the field. Louisville is moving up to a 2 seed, as you can see right there. That's more because Duke fell to a 3 seed after just not really. I mean, Louisville has the head-to-head victory over Duke, and that's why they're a 2 and Duke is a 3. Over here in the Midwest Regional in Indianapolis, where I will likely be seeing at least the Elite 8 game. I may be seeing the Sweet 16. It just kind of depends on my work schedule because I'm working 70 hours a week right now, so we'll kind of see what happens with that. And then Kansas is the 1 seed. Ohio State is continuing their downfall down the bracket. They are now down to an 8 seed. Arkansas is now down to a 9. They lost their game in the SEC Big 12 Challenge. I can't remember who was against. I want to say Iowa State, but don't quote me on that. Yale is new to the field as a 12. They are now the Ivy League representative. Vermont's down to a 13. Illinois is up to a 6. Dayton's down to a 3, but that's just more because of their schedule rather than anything else. Florida State took their spot along the 2 line. Dayton has been, they're one of the best teams in the nation, and I picked them to make the national championship game in a couple of bracketologies ago, but they're just falling to a 3 because of their schedule. Wichita State is now up to a 7. Florida State, as I just mentioned, is up to a 2. Then if we go down here to the West Regional, we have Gonzaga as the 1 seed there. USC is now up to an 8. Auburn is down to a 5. Memphis is now in the playing game. Last 4 in versus VCU. Memphis has had a really bad drop throughout the course of the season. They were a number 1 seed at one point, but now they are down to a 12, and they might not even make the tournament after getting hammered by Tulsa by 40 and then losing at home to SMU, which is a loss they could not afford. Houston is now up to a 6. Minnesota and NC State are the playing game, as you can see right there. Florida's down to a 10 after missing out on a quality win against Baylor. And UC Irvine's down to a 15. Then over here in the East Regional, we have Montana down to a 16. Arizona down to an 8 after blowing that game against Arizona State. I think they had almost a 20-point lead at one point, but Arizona State roared back and won by 1. St. Mary's is now up to a 9. Creighton's up to a 5. Kentucky is now up to a 4 after getting that quality road win against Texas Tech that I mentioned earlier. North Texas is now down to a 13. Penn State's back on the winning track and is now up to a 6. Duke is now down to a 3. Colgate's down to a 14. Wisconsin's down to a 7. I think they lost last night to somebody. I can't remember who it was to. Texas Tech is now down to a 10, which is kind of understandable, but they impressed me in that game against Kentucky. Then William and Mary is down to a 15. So then if we take a look at the bubble right here before I get into my predictions and stuff, last 4 buys are Michigan, who was like the number 1 overall seed. They were they were looking fantastic in November, but now they are in danger of even missing the tournament. I think they've lost like 6 or 7 out of their last 9 games. They are just not clicking right now. And then it was announced yesterday that I think Xavier Simpson or somebody who leads the nation in assists is going to be suspended for a violation of team rules, so it may get even worse for them. Texas Tech is also on the last 4 buys, Purdue and Oklahoma. Last 4 in, as I mentioned earlier, are Minnesota, Memphis, NC State, VCU. First 4 out are Rhode Island, Alabama, who got a really good win in the SEC Big 12 Challenge, Virginia Tech, and Mississippi State. And then the next 4 out are Tennessee, Xavier, Georgetown, and Virginia. Virginia just keeps falling down the order there. Now 8 teams out of making the tournament. Then in the conference rundown, I just want to say the Big Ten has 12 of 14 teams in the tournament, which is just insane to think about. That league as a whole is just insane with the quality of the teams in there. They're just going to be beating up on each other throughout the course of the season, so there may be teams with like a 5-13 record or however many games they play in that conference making the tournament just because of how many opportunities there are for quality wins and losses in that league. But anyway, I'm going to gonna go ahead and pull up this bracketology for you guys. If you guys have been following my bracketologies in recent times, you guys know that Brackify got shut down, so I can't do the logos and I can't do the voting with that link in the description for you guys to go and vote. And I can't put this Excel document in the YouTube description either. I tried to do that in the last bracketology that I did, but some of you guys have been going and putting your own predictions like game by game in the comment section, which I love to see. I love to see your guys' opinions, so keep doing that if you are doing it. Do it if you're not doing it, and let's go ahead and get into this bracketology. So at first we have Baylor versus the winner of Robert Morris and Norfolk State. Obviously Baylor's going to win that one. I'll put the camera closer for you guys to see. And then I think that Indiana will beat Stanford. If you had asked me that last week, I definitely would have said Stanford, but then they go and lose, have that horrible loss to California, so I can't really go with them on that one. Colorado, I think, will beat Tulsa, though I could easily see Tulsa pulling off the upset there since they did end up beating Memphis by 40. Butler, I think, will beat New Mexico State. Then we have LSU and Oklahoma. Obviously, I'm going to go with LSU on that one because you guys know how I feel about Oklahoma. Michigan State will beat Little Rock. Then Marquette and Purdue, I think that one will be a great first-round matchup, but I like Marcus Howard powering Marquette past Purdue. Then we have Louisville beating South Dakota State. I don't think Louisville would struggle too much with that one. Then I'll keep it over here in this top left regional and go with Baylor beating Indiana to move on to a spot in the Sweet 16. Then we got Butler. I think we'll be able to hold on against Colorado. Butler's kind of riding the ship after that little losing streak that they had. LSU and Michigan State. I want to say these two teams faced off last year in the tournament. Don't quote me on that, but I got Michigan State winning that one there with Cassius Winston. I think they'll be able to win that and get the victory. Then I think that Louisville will beat Marcus Howard and Marquette. Then Baylor and Butler. I think this was my championship game in like near the middle of December for that bracketology. But here I'm going to go with Baylor. I mean, I can't really go against them at this point. They're the number one team in the nation. I think these two teams faced off earlier, and I think Butler is the only team to give Baylor a loss, though that may be Washington, so don't quote me on that. I can't remember. But I'm going to go with Baylor winning that one. They're just way too hot right now. And Louisville and Michigan State, I'm going to go with Louisville winning that one. With Jordan Nwora, that team's getting it together, and I think they'll be able to move on to the Elite Eight against Baylor. Then for a spot in the Final Four, I think Baylor will come out of that region pretty unscathed. All right, they will be coming out unscathed, not pretty, but I think they'll be able to get the victory there. I think that team is just way too deep. Though I could see Louisville pulling off the victory there. Louisville just is coming kind of struggling when Jordan Nwora gets shut down. I think Baylor will do a good job of shutting him down. So down here we have San Diego State beating Montana. I wouldn't be too worried about that if I was San Diego State. Arizona, I think, will be St. Mary's with Nico Mannion. And then I'm going to go with Creighton, the Blue Jays beating Akron. Don't know too much about Akron, but I'm sure I'll learn more about them over the course of the season. Kentucky, I think, will be able to hold on against North Texas. Then I'm going to go with my first upset pick here. I'm going to go with East Tennessee State, pulling off the upset against Penn State. East Tennessee State's one of my favorite teams in the mid-majors, along with Liberty. But Liberty, as you guys saw, was not included in the tournament, and they weren't even on the bubble watch because I think they lost their second game in a row this past weekend. But I really like East Tennessee pulling off the victory there. Duke, I think, will be able to hold on against Colgate. Then I'm going to go with the 10-7 slight upset pick with Texas Tech over Wisconsin. Then I think that Miles Powell will be able to lead Seton Hall past William and Mary. So then for a spot in the Sweet 16, we have Arizona versus San Diego State. I'm going to go with San Diego State moving on there. They've been getting some quality wins recently, or not quality wins, but they've been hanging on 2 wins. They haven't been losing. I'll give them that. They're the only undefeated team left in college basketball. Then I think that Kentucky will beat Creighton. Duke, I think, will be able to hold on against East Tennessee State, though I'd love to see East Tennessee State win that game. Then I think that Seton Hall with Miles Powell will be able to move on past Texas Tech. Then for a spot in the Elite Eight, I'm going to go with an upset pick here. I'm going to go with Kentucky. Kentucky definitely passed the test against Texas Tech, and then Nick Richards is actually turning into it like an SEC Player of the Year contender. He has just been growing like crazy. I was ready to write him off before the end of the season or beginning of the season, but he has been coming into form recently. Then I'm going to go with Seton Hall and Miles Powell. You guys know, if you've been watching my videos, how much I like Seton Hall and Miles Powell, and they have another player. I can't remember what his name is, but he's been coming into form recently too. I think he's a senior. I think they'll be able to get the victory there against Duke, who just doesn't really have a go-to guy at this point because Trey Jones has been shut down recently. But then for a spot in the Final Four, I'm going to go with Kentucky moving on. I know it's a bit of a homer pick, but they just got that quality win over Texas Tech, and I mean, they've been killing it this season. They have good quality wins against Michigan State, Louisville, and now Texas Tech. I think they'll be able to get the job done there and come out of that region. So up here, we'll go up to the top right regional. We have Kansas versus Monmouth. Obviously, Kansas is going to win, but I think that's a great first-round matchup with what happened earlier in the season when the Monmouth players stole the ball and slammed it home. That was hilarious to see. Then we got Arkansas beating Ohio State. Ohio State has just been falling off the map recently. Iowa, I think, will hold on against Yale. Then I'm going to go with another upset pick here. I'm going to go with Vermont over Villanova. Villanova just hasn't really been impressing me this season. I think that Vermont gets one of the victories there. They're another team that's really good in the lower level of college basketball. Illinois, I think, will hold on against Northern Iowa. Then we got Dayton beating Wright State, a battle of the two Ohio teams right there. Then we got Wichita State. I think they'll be able to beat BYU. BYU just hasn't really been impressing me this season. Then I think that Florida State will hold on against Murray State. There's a lot of states over here in that little corner of the bracket. So then up next we have Kansas versus Arkansas. I'm going to go with Kansas winning that one. Iowa and Vermont. As much as I'd love to see Vermont win that one, I think Iowa is going to have the firepower to keep on rolling there into the Sweet 16. Dayton, I think, will hold on against Illinois, but Illinois fans should not be holding their breath too much on that one. This has been a great season, even if they lose right there. Then Wichita State, I think, will lose to Florida State. I think Florida State will be able to hold on there. Then we got Kansas and Iowa. I'm actually going to go with Kansas winning that one. As much as I want to pick Iowa, pulling off the upset yet again, I got to go with Kansas. They're just a better team at this point. Then I'm going to go with Dayton beating Florida State. I know a lot of Florida State fans are not going to be too happy with me for that one, but Dayton just hasn't been losing recently, and they have Obi Toppin, who's a National Player of the Year contender. I think they get the victory there, which sets up a rematch between Kansas and Dayton from the Maui Invitational, and I'm going to go with the winner of that game with Kansas winning there. I think I've been picking Dayton recently, but I really like Kansas, and I think Kansas impressed me in the SEC Big 12 Challenge this week. I think they beat Tennessee. Then for a spot in the, we'll figure out who's going to go to the Final Four from this region. We have the bottom right regional here. Gonzaga obviously is going to beat the winner of Stetson and Texas Southern. Then we're going to have USC beating Michigan. Michigan has just been kind of falling off the map recently. Auburn will beat the winner of VCU and Memphis, which at this point I have no clue who would end up winning that game. Maryland, I think, will avoid an upset scare from Seton Hall. Then I'm going to go with Minnesota beating NC State, and then Minnesota pulling off the upset here over Houston. I think Daniel Oturu, I think is his name. I think he's a really good player, and I think they'll be able to lead him to a victory there over Houston. Oregon, I think, will beat Winthrop. And Rutgers, I think, will fall to Florida. Rutgers has been having a great season. They are now in the tournament, which I mean is a win for them. But I think Florida's talent is just going to overwhelm them, especially with Kerry Blackshear. I mean, he hasn't really been performing this season, but I think he'll be able to turn it around in time for the tournament. Then West Virginia, I think, will beat UC Irvine. Gonzaga will beat USC. Then we have Maryland with Anthony Cohen. I think they'll be able to beat Auburn. Then Oregon will beat NC State, but I'm going to go with Minnesota winning that one. Then Oregon beating them. Then I'm going to go with West Virginia beating Florida. West Virginia's been a really surprise team this season. They are now a 2 seed. But then Gonzaga, I think, will beat Maryland. As much as I'd love to see another number 1 seed fall, I got to go with Gonzaga winning that one. And I think that Peyton Pritchard and Oregon will move on past West Virginia. Then I can't remember if these two teams played each other earlier this season, Gonzaga and Oregon. But either way, I'm going to go with an upset pick here and go with Oregon, with Peyton Pritchard moving on past Gonzaga and into the Final Four. I think they can get the job done, which sets up a Final Four of Kentucky and Baylor versus Kansas and Oregon. Well, I mean, it's not a tag team match. But up first, we're going to have Baylor beating Kentucky. I got to go with my homer pick has got to stop right there and go with Baylor. Then Kansas and Oregon. I'm going to go with Oregon winning that one with Peyton Pritchard again. I think they can get the job done there. And Oregon and Seton Hall are kind of like my second and third favorite teams from this tournament so far that aren't Kentucky, which sets up a national championship game of the two green teams, Baylor and Oregon. And at this point, I know they're the number 1 overall seed, but I got to go with Baylor. They've only lost 1 time this season, and they've just been killing it recently, giving me no reason to pick against them. So I'm going to go with Baylor winning it all. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Be sure to leave your own predictions in the comment section below. Leave a like and subscribe if you did, and my NCAA tournament ticket giveaway video will be coming out next week, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all later.